We've had some rain lately, but despite that, much of Maine is still suffering from severe drought. Statistics say this is one of the driest years on record.
That means worry about wells and crops and wildlife, and worries about fire. A major worry, in fact, for the people who work to protect Maine forests. And our 207 Don Kerrigan wondered how they're doing. Hey, Don.
Hi, folks. Our weather team has been regularly showing that drought monitor map of Maine on the forecast, and it's gotten a bit scary as we get into extreme drought. A worry, particularly for those of us who live in and near the woods, where worries about drought can be about much more than just dry wells. Fires that roar through forests and ravage whole communities. The terrible scenes of destruction get repeated almost every year, and a changing climate seemingly is making them worse. Maine has escaped that kind of devastation and damage, but this year, a year when our own woods and wildlands dried up, there was real worry.
We use a system called preparedness levels, basically 5 levels of preparedness, which would kind of be indicative of how worried we are based on our situation at hand. And we ran all the way up to level 4, so a preparedness level of level 4 here in the state of Maine, which is not that frequent.
Joe Mintz is in charge of fire training for the Maine Forest Service. And while Maine did not have a major fire this year, despite the drought, we had plenty of little ones. 824 fires, 511 acres.
Yep. Which is a pretty good testament to our folks on the ground to have that many fires and to keep acreage down. You know, their work along with the fire departments.
The Forest Service spends much of the year getting ready to fight fires, because of the ones that happened 78 years ago, the 1947 fires that burned tens of thousands of acres and destroyed hundreds of homes and businesses in Bar Harbor, in Kennebunk, and in Brownfield.
I believe somebody had said, come to the house and said, "Don't worry, Thelma, your house will never burn." But it did.
We talked with Lois Johnson 3 years ago about her memories of that fire.
Came around Perry Mountain, and you never heard any freight train make any more noise.
Really, you could hear it?
Oh, yeah, I guess you could hear it.
Those disastrous fires, driven by drought and a big windstorm, are seared into the institutional memory of the Maine Forest Service. And this year,
everything from surface fuels to deep ground fuels were very dry, very available to burn.
This year, he says, could have seen a repeat of 1947. How close have we been this year to those kind of conditions?
Probably as close to the conditions in 47. This year we were as close to those conditions that they had back in 47.
We did have those 800 plus small fires, but Maine and neighboring states are far better prepared than they were in 1947.
They'll write in which fire department and then, how many people.
And this is part of it, the annual training conference, bringing together people from multiple states to better understand how to fight those fires that do begin.
Telemark fire is an actual fire that happened out in Wyoming.
It includes work on what they call a sim table, where real fire scenarios are laid out.
Simulates fire growth on terrain. It takes into account a lot of the variables involved or the things that influence wildland fire, like topography, the fuels, the weather components.
Forcing the students to make decisions before they have to do it for real, because the risk of bad fires, Joe Mintz says, is growing.
We're seeing it longer fire seasons, more intense fire seasons, and it seems to be the highs and lows are even greater, if you would. It's much wetter than it normally would be or much drier, so radical shifts.
They now have helicopters, which weren't here in 1947, and they are game changers when fighting forest fires. They also have other tools, like better weather forecasts to predict bad fire conditions, and even satellites.
And so we're able to detect fires generally at a much faster rate than ever before, and that lends itself to faster initial attack, keeping those fires small.
But, as he says, weather and climate conditions have been changing. More windstorms have meant more blowdowns in the forests. Maine still has a vast amount of woods and wildlands, and as we saw in this year's drought, the risk of a big fire can become real very quickly.
Were we lucky, or were we just good?
A combination of both. I think leveraging some of the modern technologies, just the fact that we can get the extended forecast, the modeling for both the European and U.S. model for long-term weather forecasts, allows us to see a little bit out longer or farther out in the future than perhaps they could back in '47.
Some they can control and some they can't. That, says Joe, is the nature of their work in keeping Maine's woods from burning.
Fortunately, most of the fires we have in Maine are relatively small. The largest this year were in the 40-plus acre range, but occasionally we do have bigger ones. That was the case in 1977 when fire ravaged a portion of Baxter State Park. 1,900 acres inside the park, another roughly 1,600 on paper company land outside the park. One of the biggest forest fires in Maine since 1947. So the risk is always there, so they have to be ready.
Thanks, Don.